My name is Jeremiah Karpowicz. I'm the editorial director for Commercial UAV Expo. And anybody who's heard me talk on this stage or read one of my articles over the past year knows that top of mind for everybody in this audience is regulation and ROI. But there's another R that underlies both of those things, which is reliability. How is this technology reliable? It needs to be reliable. Years ago, there was the assumption about that, but our next speaker is going to talk about how his vision to create a drone that could fly itself really defines this reliability. So looking forward to talking through him with that. So Adam, please welcome Adam Bree to the stage, CEO of Skydio.
Let me just start by saying I'm sorry I forgot my purple suit, so we couldn't match.
UAV 2023, so put that on the list.
What's the color next year?
So, Adam, can you tell us a little bit about Skydio, about that concept of reliability, and even I just saw an interview with you where you talked about that original concept, this drone that could fly itself, and that struck me as getting to this concept of reliability that meant something then, but it means something different today.
Yeah, so I think that there's an analogy that can help us actually think about like where we are as an industry and where we're going. And if you think about the early days of the computer industry, like 40, 50 years ago, basically everything happened at the command prompt. And in order to get a computer to do something useful, you really had to be an expert in computers. You had to understand how they work. You had to be able to interface with the computer on its terms. And people did a lot of useful stuff. And actually, a lot of the work that people were doing 40, 50 years ago is still work that's happening today. It just looks very different. And I think we're kind of at a similar place with drones. And if you roll forward to where we are now with computers, they're ubiquitous. They're everywhere. All of us use them all the time for all kinds of things. And it's hard to say that drones are ever going to reach that level of scale. You kind of sound like a crazy person saying that today, although I think the potential is enormous. But we're at a place in the drone industry where people who are experts in drones have figured out how to do all kinds of really cool, useful stuff. And I don't think that was true 5 or 10 years ago, but it's definitely true today. But there's still this sort of key limiter that most of the time, if you want to get a good result, you need an expert pilot there flying the drone. And if you have that, you can. And if you don't, your odds go down quite a bit. And so a lot of this is about reliability, but a lot of it's also about capability. And this is a fundamental motivator for us at Skydio. We generally think the smarter the drone gets, the more useful it becomes to more people, the more it can adapt itself to what somebody wants to do with it through software. And the other key thing, because we're in a room full of drone experts, is this transition doesn't make drone experts obsolete. I think the computer analogy is instructive here as well. The people who are experts in computers today are 10x more valuable than they were 40, 50 years ago because computers are 100x more prevalent and powerful. And so there's going to be some transition involved, but I think we're on the cusp of these things really, really working now.
Well, does that get into, you've talked about how automation is the key to unlocking the value of drones. So is that value inherent in allowing these folks to do something different? Or like, what does the value of automation look like today?
One example of this with our products is a software product we call 3D Scan. And the motivation for building 3D Scan was going out and spending time with folks who were using our drones and other drones to perform critical infrastructure inspection and other kinds of data collection tasks, and seeing this sort of common pattern where expert operators would essentially paint the structure with the camera on the drone. They had this sort of mental model where they were flying around, they were getting full coverage of whatever structure they were trying to inspect. This was an area where we were really inspired by visionaries in industries that had figured out how to apply drones. And it's very ripe for automation. And once you automate it, it becomes super reliable. It becomes super repeatable. You get better data results. And there's opportunities like that in every direction. We're very excited about 3D Scan. It's being used across a bunch of different industries today: cell tower inspection, construction sites, crime and accident scenes. But it's still early days for these kinds of things.
That software piece is key because everybody thinks Skydio, hardware, the drone, which is what gets everybody excited, but that software piece is essential to unlocking that value, isn't it?
Yeah, I think both really matter. So Skydio is based in Silicon Valley, and I think in Silicon Valley, people tend to want to over-rotate on software. And so you hear less of this today, but there were drone companies from Silicon Valley, say 5 years ago, that would say, it's not about the drone, it's about the data. But if you want to get good data, the drone matters a lot. And so we believe very much in the interplay between the hardware and the software. So our drones are designed with full autonomy in mind. They have sensors that see everything in every direction. They have very powerful computers on board. And all of that is a platform for then a lot of software capability and a lot of software flexibility. And coming back to the computer analogy, over time, more and more of the behavior of a device, more and more of the value of a device does come to be defined by software because there's just so much flexibility there if you do it right.
You know, the news you guys made a month ago or so, however long ago it was, with Dominion Energy was really striking to me, and that was a good example of here's this technology in the real world and making a difference. But one of the things that stuck out to me was in the press release they called out how safety was such a big element. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys worked with Dominion to quantify that safety value, and then any advice for anybody in the audience that wants to enable similar value, whether it's related to safety or the ROI?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's really rewarding for me and rewarding for us as a company, and I think this is not unique to Skydio, this spreads across the whole industry, is the positive impact drones can have and safety. You know, it's hard not to spend time with an enterprise customer and hear some example of how drones can help keep people safer, because the basic capability in a lot of situations is being able to put a sensor in a really difficult place. And the ways that people do that today, would be somebody climbing a tower, or if you're inspecting a bridge, somebody hanging underneath the bridge in a thing called a snooper truck. And the examples vary by industry, but there's a lot of common themes there. And so drones give you a way to get the sensor there way more efficiently with much less risk to the people involved. So with Dominion, we got a waiver to do beyond visual line of sight flight for power plant inspection. And this is an example where the conventional ways of doing this typically involve building scaffolding, people hanging off ropes to go in and take a look at whatever they need to see. And so drones offer a fundamentally safer way to do that. Now, transition's not going to happen overnight, but pioneering customers like Dominion are really making this possible.
Well, I mean, you mentioned that transition isn't going to happen overnight, which connects to something I've heard you talk about as well, is that, just that concept of the way things are done. How do we push up against that? But at the same time, there's a reason the way things are done. So, how do you work with your customers to balance that out?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is a really important principle, and it's something that we apply inside the company as well as externally with customers. And in general, if you want to change things, it's really important to understand why things are done the way that they are. A lot of the industries that we're serving, a lot of the industries that are here today are really like the core infrastructure that the world runs on. Energy, telecommunications, public safety. And these are industries that have evolved over oftentimes hundreds of years. And the organizations that do them are really proficient at a lot of key, very challenging operational stuff that mixes people and infrastructure and hardware and equipment and IT. And so I think it's, you can go in and spend time and just see opportunity for dramatic change and doing things better and more efficiently with drones. But if you don't have a healthy respect for why things are done the way that they are, you're not going to be able to pull the levers to affect that change. So, I think that we at Skydio, we have a lot of really smart engineers that know a lot about hardware and software and artificial intelligence and computer vision, and that's a really key ingredient to doing what we're trying to do. But the other equally important ingredient are people who I really think of as industry visionaries, like people who are experts in the application of drones. So one example of this is Fritz Reber, who leads public safety integration for us, who spent 27 years with Chula Vista Police Department, and he's maybe wouldn't call himself, I would call him, he's like a brilliant technologist. He figured out how to apply drones to public safety in all kinds of really interesting and powerful ways, using the intuition that he built up with deep understanding of the challenges that police officers face. So we love working, and our customers are full of people like this. We love working with folks like that on the customer side. We also like hiring those folks into the company because they make us smarter and better, they make our products better, and then they also give us the ability to connect with customers and help them be successful, because the drone and the technology is certainly one important ingredient in the success of a drone program, but there's a lot of other things that go into it. It's not like you just sort of buy the drone and you're done. There's real operational considerations to setting these things up and scaling them. And so we're trying to do our part to be in a position to help customers succeed on that front.
Well, I think and that's one of the challenges you can run into is that whenever you're talking about adoption, it's cheaper, faster, safer. Can you prove that? If so, let's be off and running doing it. But that's not going to happen if that understanding of how this is going to change the way things are being done. Like, yes, you can do it twice as fast, but if that's going to completely disrupt what's established, then it's
yeah, I mean, it requires, I think it requires specific knowledge of the specific application. Like every case is going to be a little bit different.
Yeah. Drone programs often start small with that enthusiastic champion on a single project. What advice would you have for somebody that wants to think about scale as they're starting? Because I mean, what it means to adopt on a one project level can mean something different when it needs to go across the organization.
Yeah. So we're not neutral on this, but I think that autonomy. Trustworthy autonomy is really a key ingredient, because when you think about scale, you think about more people in an organization being exposed to and having access to the benefits that drone can provide. And in our long-term view, it's great having drone experts within an organization, but drone expertise tends to not scale. Like the whole organization is not going to become drone experts. And so if you want to set things up for scale, I think using hardware and software and systems and processes with automation and autonomy in mind is a really good starting place. I think this is where the industry is going, and it's the biggest lever available to make the technology more useful to more people within an organization.
Yeah, I mean, that connects to something that you've talked about in the past, which is the arc of autonomy, which is the path you see for the drone industry to achieve, this end state with this drones as a service, with internet-connected drones capable of delivering services, turning them into basic infrastructure. Where are we at on that arc of autonomy right now, today?
So I think we're at the most exciting point. So we're at a point where I would say the value of drones within a pretty wide swath of industries has really been established. Like the overall penetration is still pretty shallow, but if you look at leading organizations, leading customers in each of these segments, they're doing really valuable stuff that is changing the way those industries work. And so the basic paradigm today is you have an operator who takes the drone out to the site, they fly it around. Maybe they do it manually. Maybe they do it with benefits of more and more automation, which makes it easier and more scalable in that sort of operational paradigm. I think the big transition that's coming, which a lot of us kind of see and are working on, is shifting from this world where you have an operator out there flying the drone to the drone flying itself out of an internet-connected charging base station. And at that point, it really becomes like a fully software-defined capability. The people who use and benefit from the drone never have to physically touch it. The data shows up when and where it's needed. So I think that's an incredibly exciting transition point. There's a lot of ingredients that go into that, some of them technology product, some of them regulatory, and it's happening now. There's sort of this saying like the future's here, it's just not evenly distributed. I think that's very much the case with this transition, but it's coming, and I think that's going to be the dominant theme over the next 5 years or so.
Well, and when it comes, it's not going to be a matter of, okay, it's here now, let's do that. Like, to say, like, digging in and understanding what it means to enable adoption today, like, that future is going to be built on what's done today. It's just that concept of, we don't want to move forward with something because the technology is going to change or something's going to change, so let's wait. And that's not, that time is still well spent if you're doing it today.
Exactly. And I think this is, so I think, after we're up here, we're going to hear from Dave Bolter from the FAA. I think this is an area where, and this has been, unfortunately, a trend in the drone industry, I would say, over the last 5 to 10 years, where, and some of our peers in Silicon Valley are most guilty of this. I think the FAA is sort of a favorite punching bag for like, we could be doing all this amazing stuff, but the regulations won't let us. In our view, the regulations certainly play a role, but the overall trend, the overall theme, I think, has been that the FAA has leaned forward. Programs like the FAA Beyond program, which was the sort of framework under which we got the Dominion waiver, and we've done other work with North Carolina Department of Transportation, for example. These are really excellent programs that help sort of steer the path towards the future. And I'm quite optimistic about the progress we're seeing now, mostly in the form of waivers, but that sort of sets the guardrails and sets the frameworks that eventually probably becomes more scalable regulations beyond just waivers.
Well, I mean, like you guys just proved with Dominion, like you made that happen. Like this technology can, the regulation shouldn't be in the way. So can you give any advice for somebody who is looking to do something but maybe sees regulation as a barrier that prevents them from moving forward?
So, I mean, there's certainly some things that you might want to do with the drone that there's a regulatory barrier in the way. The biggest piece of advice that we would have, and this informs a lot of how we think and operate as a company, is look for that incremental path forward. There's almost always a way where you can take a small step towards the eventual vision. If you're flying a drone out of a dock, it might mean that you need to have a person on site rather than being able to do it without a person on site, and that might undermine some of the value. But it's a really powerful incremental step that allows you to work out other challenges involved in just standing up the system and getting it running and figuring out all the flows of data and whatnot. And being able to do that reliably and repeatably and having the data to show it is a really powerful piece to have in place to then get permission to maybe do it without needing to have a person there. And so I think there's examples like that all over the place where it's healthy, I think, to always look for sort of have the grand vision in mind, but look for like the small incremental step that takes you towards that grand vision. And don't get caught up by step 2 or 3 or 4 down the line might seem like it's not possible today, because if you do steps 1 and 2, 3 and 4 become more possible.
You can't skip to step 3 and 4.
Yeah.
We've got a really great crowd here. Obviously, we're going to be out on the exhibit floor shortly. I know there's a lot of people here for the first time. Would you have any advice for anybody who's here to kind of explore their options or understand what opportunities are in front of them? What would you tell them in terms of how to get the most out of being on the trade show floor or the conference program?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say for the folks that are especially new to the space, there's obviously a lot of companies like us here that have products and services available that we're excited to share. One of the things that I would be really on the lookout for is peers in your industry, like other folks from other organizations doing similar stuff to what you're doing, to see if you can learn something from them. So I think that we're constantly inspired by work that we see our customers doing, and especially kind of the visionary leaders within those organizations are folks that we really look to and learn a lot from. And we've tried to bring some of them in-house, but you can walk around and see the hardware and see the software, but I think trying to find, if you can, the experts in your industry and pick their brain, I think that there's opportunity to learn a lot there.
Yes. And as we just heard, this is the 8th edition of the event with one virtual. Any advice you had for somebody who's been here before and maybe they're familiar with some of the companies, some of the platforms that are on the exhibit floor, but they're looking to take the next step with the technology?
Yeah, so this will not be neutral advice, but I think that referencing something I said earlier, I think that automation is really, in our view, a key transition that's happening now. And so I think paying attention to the products, technologies, companies that are helping to make that happen is the way to kind of stay ahead of what's coming for the next few years.
Excellent. And last question for you: what advice would you have for somebody, or what action item do you want to give the audience for Monday morning in terms of something that they can take back to the office on Monday or take action on Monday?
A lot of advice questions here. I don't know. I might be all adviced out. I think. I think that this is not going to directly answer your question. I have kind of the Silicon Valley centric view of this. I think we've been through this sort of like the classic hype cycle of drones, where 7, 8 years ago, people sort of saw the concepts of what drones could do. They got incredibly excited about it. Investors poured a lot of money into it. There was sort of rising expectations. at least from sort of like the investor venture capital perspective, a lot of that stuff didn't work out. But I think we're pretty clearly now on the sort of substantive slope of enlightenment, where people are really doing all kinds of useful stuff with drones. It's no longer just sort of like slideware and concepts. And so there's a lot of people in this room that have made that real, made that possible. And I think in particular, the folks that are really doing the hard work of like within their organizations and their industries, figuring out where and how drones can be useful and standing up the operations to make that possible. I hope that maybe after 8 of these events, like you get some sense of perspective and satisfaction in having seen that progress.
Well, action item is the hype is real.
Let's not say hype, but I think the substance, there's the substance to hype ratio is better today than it's ever been before.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you, Adam.
All right, thanks.